Top 3 Scariest Radio Stories You Won't Believe. Story 1. The Voice in the Static. It was just another night at the station. Chris had been a radio host for years, but something about tonight felt off. He'd received dozens of prank calls, fake stories, and odd requests, but the one that came through that night was different. It was an unlisted number, no caller ID. A distorted voice crackled over the line. "Help! Help! They're coming for me." Chris chuckled at first, thinking it was just another one of the usual pranksters. But as he pressed the button to speak, the voice on the other end became more frantic. "Please, you have to listen, they're in the walls. They know where I am. They hear me. They hear everything." Chris felt his heart race, his professional facade slipping away. "Who are you?" he asked, trying to mask his fear with authority. The voice, barely audible, whispered, "You can't stop it. It's already inside." The transmission suddenly cut out with a sharp, high-pitched screech. Chris tried to reconnect, but there was only silence. He brushed it off, telling himself it was a malfunction. But that night, as he prepared to go to bed, a loud thud echoed through the walls of the station. He paused, unsure whether to ignore it or investigate. Another thud, louder this time, almost as if it was right next to him. The lights flickered, and for the first time, Chris felt the creeping sensation of being watched. He ran to the window, checking for any sign of movement, but saw nothing. Then, slowly, in the reflection of the glass, he saw it, a face staring back at him. A pale, featureless face. But worse, it wasn't just in the reflection. It was in the room with him. That night, the voice on the radio never stopped. The static never cleared. Chris was never seen again. Story 2. The Midnight Broadcast. Samantha was a new intern at a late-night radio station. It was her first week, and she had been excited to work with the team, to share stories and connect with listeners. But there was one thing she noticed about the station: the eerie atmosphere that seemed to permeate the air. The station manager, Greg, was particularly secretive, and the broadcast seemed off. It started with the old recordings. Samantha was tasked with digitizing old broadcasts from the 80s and 90s. Most of them were just routine programs, nothing special. But one late night, as she listened to a forgotten tape, something caught her ear. In the middle of an old talk show broadcast, a voice, clear but chilling, broke through the static. "Don't go home tonight. They're already waiting for you." Samantha froze, confused. The message was so out of place, so chilling, that she had to rewind the tape. It played again, louder this time, the voice almost pleading. "Don't go home tonight. They're already waiting for you." She shuddered and thought nothing of it at first. Maybe it was just a trick of the tape, a fluke. But when she shared the tape with Greg, his face went pale. "You're not supposed to have heard that," he muttered, almost to himself. "We thought it was gone." Samantha was puzzled. Greg quickly walked out, leaving her alone in the office. Curious, she decided to investigate further. She spent hours combing through more tapes, looking for something, anything that might explain what she had heard. And then, just as the clock struck midnight, another message came through. This time, the voice was unmistakable. "Samantha, they are in the building. You can hear them breathing. Run. Run now." The door behind her slammed shut with a deafening bang. The lights flickered and died. She fumbled for her phone, but the screen was black. Her breath caught in her throat when the voice, now clear and panicked, echoed through the room again. "Samantha, I'm sorry. They're here. They know you're here." She turned toward the control room window, and through the glass, she saw the shadows moving. The figure of Greg, only it wasn't Greg anymore. It was something else. Something that shouldn't have been human. Samantha never made it out. The tape was found later, recording her final breaths, a static whispering her name endlessly. Story 3. The Radio Host Who Never Left. Johnny had always loved the night shift at the radio station. The silence, the solitude. It felt like a secret world that only a select few could enter. But there was one part of his job that always unsettled him: the midnight shift. Every night, at exactly 12 a.m., the station's frequency would pick up a strange signal, a deep, distorted voice that sounded like it was coming from the abyss. It was the same every night. A booming voice, slurring words, but always the same message. "Come closer. Come closer to the sound of the dark." Johnny thought it was just a glitch at first, maybe some leftover signal interference. But as the days went on, the voice seemed to call to him. It didn't make sense. How could something like that continue through the airwaves without explanation? One night, Johnny decided to trace the signal. He spent hours adjusting the frequencies, his heart racing. But then, to his horror, the transmission grew stronger and clearer. The voice echoed louder, almost like it was right next to him. "Johnny, you should have never looked. Now you're part of the broadcast." The room grew colder. The air around him grew thick with dread. He could hear faint breathing on the other end, deep, unnatural breaths. The lights flickered violently, casting long shadows that twisted and stretched like they had a life of their own. Johnny, terrified, ran to the control board to shut it off, but the equipment wouldn't respond. The screen in front of him went blank and the voice spoke once more. "Now, you will stay with us. Forever." In an instant, the station went dead silent. No hum, no static, no voice. Just the crushing, suffocating silence of a void that stretched on forever. Johnny's body was found the next day, slumped over the radio console. His eyes wide open, his mouth frozen in a scream. But worse, his voice was still being broadcast, repeating the same thing over and over. "Come closer. Come closer to the sound of the dark." These are the stories you won't forget. They live, breathing in the dark corners of the world, waiting to be heard. But remember this, you can never escape the voices you invite into your life. If you dare to hear more, don't forget to subscribe, because some stories never stay behind the speakers. They find a way to crawl out and into the real world.